The state of California wants to pass legislation that would force landlords to accept back rent payment all the way up until a sheriff is knocking on the door. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting topic for you today, and it's coming out of the great state of California, and it has to do with tenants paying their rent, okay? And trying to pay back rent that they owe to a landlord during the eviction process. So many states do not force the landlord to accept those rent payments. In fact, most states don't force landlords to accept these late rent payments so they can continue with the eviction process. And I personally believe that is the way it should be, okay? If a tenant pays you rent late, and then the landlord accepts that rent payment, that means the landlord has to keep you up in there for even longer. And if you then stop paying after that point, you have to somehow start over the process from the very beginning. So that's a good reason why landlords don't want to have to go through it, especially in states like California, where the process is long, drawn out, and expensive. Why would we want to keep starting and restopping these cases, okay? Part of the reason they're doing this is because they say, well, tenants are coming up with rental assistance money, and that rental assistance could have made them good on what the landlord was owed, right? Well, here's my problem with that. How long do you expect the landlord to wait, okay? If you are behind 2 years on rent, and you're like, well, you know what? The rental assistance is coming. The rental assistance is coming. And the landlord decides, hey, you know what? I can't deal with you up in there any longer. I can't sit around and wait for the rental assistance to come eventually. No, I need to get you up out of there and get a new tenant up in there who is paying as soon as possible. It doesn't matter if you can pay me now. Plus, I'm still worried that you're going to present a problem to me going on into the future. I don't understand why people they don't get it. They don't get it. They think, oh, well, you know what? This is just a one-time thing. No, these people who are going through these financial issues that cause them to miss their rent payments and lead to eviction, it's like a constant cycle with them, okay? And I've seen this personally, as I had a tenant who I had started the eviction process on, and they were able to come up and with the money that they owed me and paid me so that they wouldn't get evicted. And guess what happened 6 months down the line? Same exact scenario. And I did go through with the eviction the second time. I didn't accept any additional payments from them and got them up out of there, okay? More trouble than what it's worth dealing with all these new laws and regulations, especially that places like California are trying to implement. So yeah, they think landlords are stupid. They think that we should be the housing provider like we're the welfare system. We are the government housing provider. We have to keep the people housed. No, we don't. Absolutely not. And if they drive every single landlord out of business, then maybe they'll be sitting there wondering, well, what happened? Where are you going? Why aren't you renting out your place? Well, you did this. You created the problem, okay? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So, do you think landlords should be forced to accept rent payments after they have already filed eviction? Okay? And what I mean by rent payments is the money that you are owed. Let's say that a tenant is behind 2 or 3 months in rent, and the tenant comes up and they have all that money that's owed. Should the landlord be forced to accept that? Okay? Now, my opinion is the same as it has always been. Up to the individual landlord. If the individual landlord decides to accept that money, drop the eviction, and allow the person to stay, that is their decision. But when we bring the government in there, and they're the middleman, and they're saying, you must accept this money, you must keep this tenant, you cannot do this, you have to do that, that's where the problem occurs. That's where all the conflict occurs. That's where, my issue arises, okay? So anyway, tell me what you think in the comment section down below, and let's get into the article and see what it says. This article is coming from calmatters.org, and it says, they tried to pay their overdue rent. Their landlord wouldn't accept it. The first question is, why wouldn't the landlord accept it, right? But anyway, let's see what the article says. Crouching on the sidewalk in front of his apartment in San Francisco's Tenderloin neighborhood last Monday, Bradford Berger shuffled through legal papers in a wrinkled manila folder. It was a stressful morning. He was scrambling to get ready for a chemotherapy appointment with his wife, who'd been diagnosed with lymphoma the month before. In 2 days, sheriff's deputies were scheduled to evict the two of them from the subsidized apartment they'd shared for the last 15 years, even after a local rental assistance program offered to pay the landlord, an affordable housing nonprofit, the back rent they owed. It was a gloomy way to mark their anniversary for the couple who've been married 19 years as of this month. It was also a fairly common situation, legal aid attorneys say. They try to garner sympathy. Oh, the wife is suffering from cancer, this, that, and then you're like, wait a second here. Let me read what these details say. They said, okay, these people have been living in this apartment for 15 years, okay? And they're in San Francisco, California, one of the hardest places in the entire country to remove any sort of tenant, okay? Any tenant. They're going to have a lot of leeway, a lot of free time. They're probably going to have free legal representation, etc. And the landlord actually already has the eviction completed. Okay, the eviction is already completed. Sheriff's deputies are on their way to get these people out of there. So how long did they not pay rent before this situation became a big problem? Probably a year or more. We're talking about San Francisco here, okay? Then you read, oh, well, you know what? They're living in a subsidized apartment. This isn't even a full price apartment. So we have people who are unable to pay their subsidized rent, so they're super cheap rent in a very expensive place like San Francisco, and they've gone through the full eviction process. The landlord has followed the legal system, and then they're saying, well, the landlord now, this isn't fair what the landlord is doing, so now they should be forced to accept this rental assistance from this rental assistance program. Why? Okay, and you think the landlord doesn't like these tenants? Landlord has had them in the property for 15 years. Obviously, these tenants, the issue isn't their tenancy. It has other problems, okay? There's other issues involved in this whole situation. There's a reason the landlord wants these people out, will not accept rent from this point going forward. Maybe it's the fact that these people are substantially behind on rent and that they will likely become substantially behind on rent again, okay? That's a big thing for me. If you think of, okay, all your employment situation, the fact that you're not able to pay your portion of the rent or whatever, that means to me that I don't see things changing in the future, and I just need to get you up out of here so that I can get somebody in here who can pay. That's what it means to me, okay? So, hard luck story. But anyway, let me skip down a little bit in this article because they're talking about what they want to do, what they want to change, because that's what they need in California to fix things. They need more laws and more rules and more regulations. California law allows landlords to evict tenants for non-payment regardless of whether they are willing and able to pay their overdue rent. Tenant advocates say that undercuts the effectiveness of rental assistance programs, a key strategy local governments and nonprofits use to keep people housed. They're pushing for a proposal in the legislature that would bring California in line with 21 other states that ban non-payment evictions for tenants willing and able to pay up. They say willing and able. If you're willing and able to pay the rent, why didn't you just pay it in the first place? Huh? Because you're not willing and you're not able to pay the rent, which is why you need rental assistance. They're doing a play on words here, bunch of garbage. But the fact of the matter is you're not willing, you're not able to pay the rent. Otherwise, you wouldn't be facing eviction. And trying to come up with the money 2 months later or 2 years later or whatever, that doesn't help the landlord recover all the losses that they experienced. So I don't feel like the landlord is in the wrong. They are following the law as the law is written in the state of California, mind you. And now you're trying to, once again, change the rules in the game in the middle of the game. That's one of the worst things you could possibly do. Drive people out of business. You're going to drive people out. The California Apartment Association, which represents landlords, says the legislation is unnecessary because tenants can already delay evictions if they're facing financial hardship, and has dubbed it one of its top 5 rental housing killer bills this year. Non-payment evictions plummeted during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic when California banned them for tenants with pandemic-related financial challenges. They've since spiked in many areas. Of the 166,463 eviction notices filed in the city of Los Angeles between February of 2023 and mid-November of 2024, for example, 94% were for non-payment of rent, according to the city's controller's office. Rent delinquency accounted for more than 85% of eviction cases in San Mateo County in 2023, a Stanford study found. And that's basically perfectly in line with what I've seen. Between 90 and 95% of all evictions are for non-payment of rent, period. It's pretty simple, okay? So, you know, like the lie that the evil landlord wants to get rid of people, it's just a bunch of garbage. But you know what? I believe that the landlord, especially in a state like California, they need the ability to say, hey, we're not going to accept this rent payment. That's how they are able to get other problem tenants in other areas up out of a property. Okay, and they go over that here in this article, which is a good thing. You know, usually they don't talk too much about what the landlords are going through. It says, landlords can work with tenants who've applied for help, and many do, often requiring that tenants commit to a payment plan or pledge to pay on time in the future. Owners would rather have the rent than go to court, said Deborah Carlton, Executive Vice President of Government Affairs for the California Apartment Association. But tenant attorneys say it's also common for landlords to refuse payment once they've decided to evict. They say that because the property owner can choose whether to allow the tenants to catch up on rent, factors such as the tenant's relationship with on-site manager or even their race or disability can sometimes play a role. Garbage, BS. Just, you know, they're like, oh, see, they're discriminating based on race and disability. No, they're not. Okay, why would they even put you in the place in the first place if they cared about your race or disability? Idiotic. But I'm not I'm not surprised they would try to play the race card on this kind of article to try to garner sympathy. Property owners who file a non-payment eviction may have other reasons to want to evict particular tenants, such as if they are not keeping their unit clean or antagonizing other tenants, said Daniel Bornstein, a San Francisco attorney representing landlords. The easiest type to prove is non-payment of rent, he said. And he's absolutely right, okay? So a property owner might want to get rid of a bad tenant for many other reasons, but the easiest thing to prove is non-payment of rent. So if you're talking about a tenant, let's say a tenant who is super loud. They play their stereo loud at 2 a.m. every single morning, disturbing all the other tenants in the building. All the other tenants want him out, but you can't get rid of the guy for that reason, okay? Not without a long, drawn-out process. But this person pays the rent late one month, and you're like, hey, I can easily prove that this guy paid the rent late, and you're able to get rid of that guy. Well, that's what landlords do. This is the kind of path that we use in order to remove bad tenants. And that's what a lot of people, these tenant rights advocates, don't understand. You know, they sit there and they think that, oh, these are innocent angels. They never do anything wrong. It's a bunch of garbage. It's a bunch of garbage. And that's what I talk about all the time on this channel. But what do you think, okay? I'm going to put a link to this article in the comment section down below. And, you know, tell me what you think.